Okay.
All right, Freddie or other, where would you guys like to start? And please, somebody give me a 10-minute warning to the hour.
To what?
I can't be late for a professional moment.
I want to be very professional.
We could talk
Irony.
about the sleep disorder
Yes.
and so categorizing it. So we were talking before, like if you remember the dream versus you don't, and she does.
Yeah, we're also talking about when it happens during REM versus not. And there was a scene where she was doing a sleep test and she was in REM when she had the nightmare. So we were thinking it's a REM related sleep disorder.
And we talked about this on Tuesday,
Yes.
that there's more than one classification system.
Mhm.
One that we are not talking about right now primarily focuses on behaviors versus EEG findings.
Mhm.
Those that focus on behaviors are labeled the parasomnias, and those that are not are referred to as the dysomnias. There are parasomnias that occur during and outside of REM, and there are dysomnias that occur during and outside of REM. From the other perspective, we can just say, listen, we're going to go REM versus non-REM. There are REM-related sleep disorders that are parasomnias and dysomnias, and there are non-REM related sleep disorders that themselves are parasomnias and dysomnias, right? So just make sure we frame that correctly in terms of what we already discussed on Tuesday. So we're going to discuss what ails Nancy Thompson from the perspective of REM versus non-REM, right? And I think the way the writer-director Wes Craven builds this is pretty consistent with the way a physician would in clinical practice, and that is we see things clinically, we have a working suspicion, and then ultimately the polysomnography confirms our clinical suspicion. We could have guessed in the first 30 minutes of the movie before that sleep study that this was REM related for all the obvious reasons. She's dreaming, okay? She remembers the dreams. So it's no surprise to us that thankfully, the way Wes Craven writes the scene at that sleep lab, she is REMing when she wakes up. Right? All right. And then from there, where your thoughts carry you?
Well, when REM, you're supposed to be paralyzed and she's not. She gets up and she acts out her dreams. We were also talking about how in her classroom she was dreaming. I guess she fell asleep in class and then started dreaming and got up out of her chair and started freaking out.
And what's that referred to? Well, you just described. There's a clinical term for that.
Narcolepsy?
Sleepwalking? Night terror?
Now, you guys are coming up with diagnoses already. I mean, the clinical term used to describe one falling asleep because they're tired. Like everybody right here probably has somewhat sleepy. I'm sleepy. What differentiates fatigue or lethargy from blank? And the answer is the individual with blank actually can and often does fall asleep. People who are just tired or lethargic don't. Excessive daytime sleepiness or EDS. Excessive daytime sleepiness. And it's interesting and it's important to know because there are 2 or 3 conditions published in the DSM where EDS is a criteria. So this might help us or assist us in developing our differential diagnosis, really focusing and distilling our differential. Other thoughts? I heard a bunch of diagnoses shouted out. I think the very first one that would have popped into everyone's mind is nightmare disorder. So for the DSM definition, what is nightmare disorder?
You're not supposed to be able to move because you're in the REM.
True. And then the cardinal feature is persistent and or recurrent nightmares
Right.
that are clinically significant. Right, I mean, again, if anybody in here has a nightmare, I'm not gonna label you as mentally ill. But if they're recurring and they begin to affect your functioning, you have a disorder. And that disorder is most likely nightmare disorder. Now, there's two answers. One, you're not allowed to say it around this table, and one that you are. Why is A Nightmare on Elm Street, even though the title strongly suggests so, not about nightmare disorder?
Why is the night? Is it because of the physical symptoms that they're having in addition?
I think you're on the right path. So just like about words in your mouth, it appears that there are additional signs that allow us to say there is a larger condition within which the nightmares are explained. And when that happens, right? I mean, if somebody has, God forbid, has laryngeal cancer and comes in with a sore throat, you're not going to just diagnose them with pharyngitis, right? You're going to hopefully work them up for meds, right? It's a larger illness that would explain the current symptoms. So while nightmare disorder is probably going to be provisional, I think fairly quickly we can move on from it. What's the larger illness that we're not allowed to talk around this table about?
PTSD.
Yeah, so every movie's about PTSD, so it can never be about PTSD. It's too easy. All right, so we'll mention it and we'll move on. I did hear another diagnosis before though, that makes a heck of a lot of sense here. And would take precedent over nightmare disorder because it's larger illness.
Regional? Or is it?
I can't rule that out either.
The sleep disorder,
Sleep disorder, yeah.
Oh, okay.
REM sleep behavior disorder.
It's a biggie. I mean, it was recently described that she is not paralyzed, and I'm concerned. Now, if REM sleep behavior disorder was the single best answer, and I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but if it was, what would you have told Wes Craven upon consultation that he should have done with regard to making up this script that really would have made this medically accurate? So what is REM sleep behavior disorder?
He wouldn't remember it.
Do what?
He would,
Right? It's REM sleep. Yeah, she would.
right,
Okay.
it's
But-
where you act it out.
Which-
She would get out of bed, out of the classroom,
And she does.
but then when she wakes up, she's still in her chair.
True, true. So you're saying at a scene or two where she's not in the
Moving.
same spot where she started? That's true. There's something even, what is this condition? 9 times out of 10, because people will get on their favorite social media website before they come to you as a physician, as a clinician. They're gonna ask you this question. What's the question they're gonna ask if you're bringing this up as a possible diagnosis? Doc, what are my chances of developing Parkinson's disease? What's the relationship between REM sleep behavior disorder and Parkinson's?
This is the alpha something.
Yeah. Alpha-synuclein, right?
Oh, how do you spell
Alpha-synuclein
that?
disposition or distribution. Right? There are abnormal proteins embedded in and throughout the brain that cause this. And because of that, there is a relationship, there's a risk factor here that puts the individual at risk for developing future Parkinson's disease and Parkinson's related dementia. So Marge, her mother, may have been maybe a little older, not much though, and maybe some aspect of dementia. Okay? Maybe a little less alcohol, a little more wandering. That would have been nice. Keeping it fictional, right? Well, the fact that Wes Craven, who is as perfect a producer you're ever going to say, didn't do this suggests to me that maybe this isn't the single best answer. There might be more to the game here. By the way, we're going to the National Pop Culture Association conference in a couple weeks. This year it's in New Orleans. Previous to COVID, we had gone every single year. It's a friggin' fantastic conference. Wes Craven, there's multiple themed. They're all 90-minute symposia, one after the other, one better than the other. I mean, if you're a horror fan, if you're a pop culture fan, I mean, you can't possibly get to enough during these conferences. And there was one that I went to, 90 minutes on Wes Craven. And the way these symposia are set up is that they're like 3 presenters, about 20 minutes apiece, and then 10 minutes each for some Q&A, right? And even though for instance, this one symposium that I went to was based on Wes Craven, it comes from three completely different directions. So they'll have somebody who might be a teacher in English from an undergraduate university. There could be a philosopher, and then there's like a third person that might be an MD. There's a common thread, hence the title of what the symposium is, but the three different papers that are presented, the abstracts that are discussed, are very diverse. It's a blast to kind of sit there and hear this. Well, I go to one on Wes Craven, and I honestly forgot exactly what the first 30 minutes is about, but it was something that made sense. One of them definitely was from a horror writer's perspective, an author's perspective, and that one made sense. The third one, though, is the one I'll never forget. And focusing on what, because and one of them alluded to A Nightmare on Elm Street, but really discussed a lot of his other films, right? Which was kind of cool. A lot of these people don't go with the most popular one because they're fanatics, and they know the lesser known works, which really makes the conference different, which was a lot of fun. Well, anyway, the first two pieces, arms of the symposia, are not really something that shocked me, right? And there was even a single allusion to Nightmare on Elm Street. All that said, the third person comes up, and unbeknownst to me, I had no clue in the world that Wes Craven actually produced a porno film. But here it was, and he showed a clip. And it wasn't during the, I have to be honest, it wasn't during the clip, but it was during that 30-minute segment that my wife walks in, right? Because I'm texting back and forth, hey, I'm in room with 1304. I'm actually in a Wes Craven. Either meet me here, I'll be done in maybe half an hour. I'll meet you, wherever. Then she walks in, she's so we know. I'm like, I can't even explain it because I had no idea this was coming up. And the one thing about this conference, which actually makes it a lot better than the APA, but also at the same time falls far short, is that the level of organization is poor. Meaning that if you read the actual course description, you would not have known this necessarily, right? There's a lot missing. With the APA, you know exactly what you're walking into. Sometimes in these types of venues, that is the Pop Culture Association conference, you walk into a room thinking you're going to see one thing and something else pops up, and they forgot to tell you that they make the proper announcements to of the room change and things like that. And again, it's a little frustrating, but then again, there's some benefit to that too. It's not nearly as rigid. So very laid back and make sure. And for the docs or the future docs that go, it's an easy presentation because everybody else but the MDs literally reads from a piece of paper. Like it's nothing like a medical student presentation where, of course, we make sure that you're on an island alone and just present it from memory, right? So it's a lot easier presentation for those that have papers that go. So we'll be there in a couple of weeks and presenting, I think, on one of the courses that was taught Wednesday morning for you guys. Anyway, I digress. Back to what the heck is going on with Nancy. You mentioned the polysomnography, right? Another observation of the fact that she was in REM. Because something else happens there, and it isn't the hat, but we'll get back to that. But there's something else that happens there that people, I think, is so obvious that people kind of miss, or at least unconsciously don't think they need to focus on.
Her eye movement.
We talked about that. It's something about her eye, but something more about her eye movement, not beyond the fact that she actually has it and that she is in REM. So I will share with you, it's not true. I will share with you that one of the interns that was just in my office asked if she could actually not be part of this discussion, and instead, because of a very difficult time sleeping last night, use my office to take a nap. Right. So now that I told you that, we're gonna just sneak in and just bust her a little bit. And when we walked into the room, what time is it now? About 20 after?
Yeah, you guys time, 12:30.
12:30. Let's say we walked in only 10 minutes after we started this, just to see and have some fun. Should she be in REM?
No.
Why not?
Cause it happens like later, 2 hours in.
Yeah.
What though, if we walked into that room and we saw her eyes fluttering, what then? Because that's what happens to Nancy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no. No.
It's called delayed REM onset.
But the
I'm sorry,
opposite.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It's the opposite. I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Early REM onset. Differential diagnosis. Now, when you guys are laughing so hard at Serenity that she wakes up, she then reports back to us. I really haven't been able to sleep for the past 2 nights because of exams. So what happens here, this is catch up. Right, so sleep deprivation is in our differential diagnosis. But she doesn't share that information with us. And we decide, you know what, as great clinicians, we're gonna ask her, hey, how you been sleeping? She initially says, mind your own business, but we present and we make her answer. And she then discloses that she's been sleeping fine. Now what? Is there a condition that is defined through early REM onset?
Hypersomnia?
Narcolepsy, which by the way, has a diagnostic criteria, also includes excessive daytime sleeping. God bless you. See, it's true. Yeah, Nancy has narcolepsy. What are some other aspects of narcolepsy?
Sleeping in any condition? Falling asleep under any condition?
Which of course she does, right? REM intrusion, right? That's really the pathology here, REM intrusion. So as it's 12:30 and you're listening to an incredibly articulate and enthusiastic course director, you can actually just start running. Right? In this case, the REM intrusion would be into the beta state. So the beta waves abruptly stop and you begin to REM. This also can happen with twilight, so maybe alpha or theta, when you're kind of just dozing off. And when that happens, for example, let's use the alpha/theta phase. As you're kind of just beginning to nod off and all of a sudden abrupt REM. Not only are you going to be paralyzed, right? But what else might happen? As a product of direct consequence of the sleep paralysis, you can definitely fall, which are the drop attacks, right? Catalepsy. I always get these two mixed up.
Yeah. Cataplexy.
Cataplexy. Yeah, cataplexy. Which is a diagnostic criteria. What else? One more thing, one more biggie. Visual hallucinations. If you REM during a wakeful period, you're gonna see stuff. You're gonna see stuff. Now, those periods of twilight are at the very beginning of sleep, right? The transition from alpha to theta, and at the very end of the sleep cycle, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, when you transition from theta to alpha. Right. So you're at risk for at both times. If those visual hallucinations occur at the beginning of the night, when you're transitioning from theta or alpha to theta, they're called hypnagogic hallucinations, GOGIC, hypnagogic. The hypnopompic, POMPIC, hypnopompic is when they occur from your transition out of theta into alpha and then beta, which be early in the morning.
So you said hypnoponic?
Hypnopompic, POMPIC. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic. Freddy Krueger is nothing more than a hypnagogic hallucination.
So another differential I was kind of considering, but eventually ruled out, was shared delusion. But I didn't really think there was like a dominant like personality or like persona that kind of like initiated everything. But then how are they all having the same hallucination?
So there's a couple of things to consider here. A couple of things to consider. Number one, the easiest to suggest would be that they all have a common trauma. and therefore they all have a common sequelae to that trauma. Of course, that would bring us right back into the discussion of PTSD, and we're not allowed to talk about PTSD. The other idea here would be to appreciate that shared psychotic disorder is only one of several shared disorders. That is, shared psychosis, often referred to as folie à deux, the folie of two, usually works from a, like you said, dominant to a more submissive. But there's also folie à trois, etc. But in each case, dominant to submissive. There's another condition called folie familier. And if anybody here speaks French, if I'm mispronouncing family, please correct me. But here, individuals actually have that delusion simultaneous. I'm sorry, I take it back. It's simultaneous, which is simultaneous. So it doesn't work dominant to submissive. It just works simultaneously, and that's what might be going on here. Unfortunately, every horror movie, this is the final girl motif, right? This is the Nancy Thompsons of the world who have something going on with her. She tells everybody, including her dad, who is a police officer. Nobody ever believes them until the last 10 minutes of the movie, and then it's too late. That's the final girl motif. So every horror movie is about shared psychotic disorder, which is why we can't say that that's what's going on here. So along with PTSD, we can't talk about any of the variants of shared psychotic disorder. The other thing to consider here is that they may not have shared a personal experience together, but instead an ancestral experience together. And this really gets at the idea of the collective unconscious and the role of the unconscious in dreaming. How I can have a dream and you could have a dream and it could be the same exact dream, but we have no personal shared experience. Ancestrally, we do though, and that's what really separates Jung from Freud. Carl Jung accepted Freud's idea of the critical nature of one's personal unconscious, but in addition to that, invented the concept, came up with the concept of the collective unconscious, which are those shared ancestral experiences, and that's what this might be about. And it's funny because, like you have a stand down. Johnny Depp's character, Glenn. He actually references something ancestrally, right? The blank tribe, I used to be able to embrace their fears. Those people actually then robbed the power away from. So actually, at least alludes to the idea of the collective unconscious. In this way, Freddy Krueger is a visual hallucination primarily experienced upon falling asleep, and therefore is nothing more than a hypnagogic hallucination that is defining of as part of the diagnostic criteria of narcolepsy, REM intrusion. When dreams intrude the wakeful state, you are diagnosed with narcolepsy. When bad dreams, like nightmares, invade the wakeful state, you're diagnosed with narcolepsy. Narcolepsy has its onset in adolescents, which is medically accurate in this movie. The sex ratio is 1-to-1, which is great because there are 2 teen girls and there are 2 teen guys. So on a board exam, if you ever have to talk about prevalence, demographics, it's 1-to-1, which is exactly what the movie portrays. And there's an HLA association, and to say that this is somehow associated to Nancy's parents would be an understatement. Now, it's largely metaphorical, but that HLA-DR component, the heritability of this, is something that is also a theme in the movie. There's a heritable nature to this. What the curse of your parents is going to be bestowed upon the children. Right? Whether we're talking about medically, whether we're talking about supernaturally. So there's a nice parallel between this film and narcolepsy. Nancy also makes a comment about, or at least asks the sleep tech, I don't know if he's an MD or not, can I just take a pill? And his I think I'm going to paraphrase. His answer is, no, you can't stop dreaming. We all dream. Which is true, but there's a little bit more to it. And that is for narcolepsy, we in fact do give them a pill. And the pill we give them has its main focus pharmacologically to disrupt REM. So we give them a REM disruptor. And the tricyclic antidepressants are notorious for disrupting REM. So while it's really not a cure for narcolepsy, by disrupting REM, you are just lowering the odds of being in REM and therefore lowering the odds of having REM intrusion. And the tricyclic that is most often is called protriptyline. It's the one with the highest anticholinergic side effect, and that's the intent. To treat the excessive daytime sleepiness, we usually give them stimulants. So you take a tricyclic in the evening or around bedtime, and then you take a stimulant in the morning, like Ritalin. And that's usually the dual therapy, at least medical therapy. So the sleep tech wasn't exactly accurate. There probably are some pills, some prescription meds that you can give for narcolepsy here. There's also another REM disruptor called Xerum. We just talked about this, which is GHB.
So I know in the movie, Nancy, like, she's drinking coffee to try to sleep. So is coffee or caffeine not a REM? Or is it more like
That's a stimulant.
just?
I mean, is it going to disrupt REM? Yes, but it's going to actually even delay sleep onset, which is her intent.
Right.
Right. I think the role of the caffeine pills in this movie is very important because before we actually arrive at the diagnosis of delirium, narcolepsy, we have to first rule out a substance-induced sleep disorder. But clearly, the sleep disruption occurs prior to her beginning to take the caffeine pills. So, and it just reminds us that in psychiatry, there are predisposers, precipitants, and perpetuating factors. And the caffeine here is a clear biological perpetuating factor. And that's its role here. It's not as a precipitant. It's not a trigger. Couple more thoughts. Number one, getting back to the heritability. How do I put this? How about that hat and the gloves in that scene when Marge is trying to convince her daughter this cannot possibly be true, and then comes full with the story. Anything odd about that?
Like the stuff with the manual murder.
The evidence.
Yeah. First of all, it's evidence. Second of all, emotionally, what are you doing?
Right.
Right. There's also something else. The dialogue itself struck me as incredibly odd, and I'm not trying to be nasty, but this is more of a hint. Your generation probably will not pick up on it, probably as much as the generation born of the 80s. Any idea what I'm getting at? She calls him Fred. Right? Nobody calls him Fred. Nobody has ever called him Fred. Right? The world knows him as Freddy Krueger. I mean, I've been to more than enough horror cons, and all of the above, even in print media. It's Freddy Krueger. It just every time I watch it, it strikes me as very awkwardly odd.
Well, not on the hat, it says,
Mhm. Go with that.
so that's what he calls himself? That's his,
55?
Before.
Wait, okay, good.
yeah.
Give me 5-minute warnings up until.
So you think she gave him that?
She did.
Like there's like some type of relationship?
Absolutely.
And even like, that could be good then. I don't know.
She's so smart.
Your dad?
No,
I don't know, I'm just.
At the very least. At the very least.
Wait, so he's a.
Well, I mean, yes, because he was somebody who was part of that neighborhood, so, and they knew, I guess they knew him.
She had an affair with him. If not her dad, she had an affair with him. The timeline matches up where Nancy looks like is the one that got away,
Yeah,
which is why it takes a lot of time with her. The first three died instantly.
yeah.
He takes his time with her. It's very sexualized,
Mhm.
even for the 80s. It was
Yes.
very sexualized. There's a reason why. Remember, Freddy Krueger's a pedophile. That's his background.
Right.
He's a serial child murderer and pedophile. So the places that she goes, this hideaway, she was there. She was there. There's even more to it. We talked about the heritability of narcolepsy. Is there any evidence that Marge has narcolepsy? I mean, if she was on Xerum, if she was on GHB, her boyfriend took some from the medicine cabinet. Took that little girl. It's just a very odd scene for her to keep that stuff, call him Fred, and then have the hat, right? And she keeps all the stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because she had the hat in the drawer.
Yeah.
And his glove.
Yeah, she did. She did.
She did, she
Yeah.
kept it.
Listen, if the hat got there somehow, right? Again, I know that it got there because there's a supernatural element, but if Marge and or Nancy presented to you as a clinician, there's no way, again, if you're gonna be working with me as a future student, medical student or future resident in psychiatry, and I ask you for a differential, I'm like, hey, Dr. T, I think the hat appeared there because of this ghost-like character that comes in and out of reality. I'm like, we gotta talk about your joy when we repeated. It either got there from Marge or Nancy. She had that. So either Nancy found it, or Marge, or because it was in Marge's possession. But either way, Marge just had it in her possession. Either way you look at it.
Yeah, and why don't you keep it?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
You don't care. Yeah.
One more quick thing before I have to bolt. The fact that this is a hypnagogic hallucination, largely due to narcolepsy, largely due to the product of sleep paralysis and active dreaming, does link quite nicely to the shadow people. And this is not just a medical link. When one of the original depictions, one of the original reports of the shadow people, and I believe it was Somalia, broke, it makes the LA Times. Right, but this little child, I think in Somalia, sees a shadow person and instantly dies. Right, it makes the LA Times. It is that very article that Wes Craven reads and inspires him to write this movie. So from Wes Craven's mouth, Freddy Krueger is a version of the shadow people, which also is consistent with the collective unconscious and how different people in the real world, starting in Somalia, at least the initial report, and then several cases since, can have the same exact experience without having, same exact dream / nightmare being visited by the shadow people when they don't share any common experiences, right? Somalia versus LA versus New Jersey, 1968 versus 2025. All right, we'll leave it here. Any questions? Any questions on narcolepsy?
So can you not be paralyzed if you have narcolepsy? Because I know one of the symptoms is sleep paralysis.
Right, yeah, yes. A person to be diagnosed with narcolepsy need not necessarily have all the criteria. The polysomnography, more specifically, the type of sleep study is called a multiple sleep latency test. And even though that's not what's depicted, or at least written in the script of A Nightmare on Elm Street, it is actually what's depicted. So what happens here is that I bring my patient into the sleep lab. I allow her to fall asleep, and then 20 minutes later, I wake her. And I see if she went into REM. Make her go back to sleep again. 20 minutes later, I wake her again. And we do this for the whole night. If she goes into REM, I think it's 50% of the time, it rules in for narcolepsy. It's called a multiple sleep latency test. MSLT. And even though an MSLT is not ordered in this movie, it ends up being that because she ends up falling asleep and within 20 minutes. And I nerded out in this to have a PowerPoint where I actually have a timer and I show you how quick she wakes up. It's well within 20 minutes.
Because she did mention like, "Oh, wake me up in 20 minutes" to her dad.
Yeah. Multiple sleep latency test. Rolling in for narcolepsy. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave it here. If anything comes up, my phone will be on, all right? Thanks.